When The Last Jedi was released in 2017, it didn't just divide the fanbase, it fractured the foundation of the sequel trilogy. Major storylines were abandoned, legacy characters were reshaped beyond recognition, and the momentum built by The Force Awakens was brought to a screeching halt. Luke Skywalker was reimagined as a bitter recluse, a choice that even Mark Hamill publicly opposed. Snoke was killed off with almost deliberate indifference, his backstory tossed aside like it never mattered, and the mystery of Rey's origins was shrugged away as if it had never been important in the first place. What was meant to be the bold middle chapter of a new era instead sent the trilogy careening off course. To find out how it all went wrong, let's take a look at how Rian Johnson broke the sequel trilogy. We all know the story. After Disney acquired Star Wars, Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy laid out an ambitious plan for the sequel trilogy. Each film would be directed by a different filmmaker. The idea was to bring fresh perspectives to each episode, letting visionary directors put their own stamp on their respective films, in order to keep things from going stale. But in Disney's rush to recoup their $4 billion investment, The Force Awakens was fast-tracked into production with no clear roadmap for the trilogy as a whole. However, not all of that is entirely true. First, Abrams was initially asked to direct all 3 films, but he turned that down, resulting in Kennedy coming up with the idea to hire a different director for each. And second, Abrams actually wrote treatments for episodes 8 and 9 before he stepped away. But when Rian Johnson began to work on episode 8, he did exactly what he was brought in to do, make the film his own, as he scrapped Abrams' treatments and started fresh. Rian Johnson has long been known for subverting expectations. It's a hallmark of his storytelling style. His debut film, Brick, took the hard-boiled detective noir genre and dropped it into the unlikely setting of a modern high school, earning praise for its originality and boldness. Johnson has never been interested in playing things straight, and with The Last Jedi, he brought that same mindset to Star Wars. Rather than delivering payoffs to the mysteries set up in The Force Awakens, he leaned into misdirection, rejecting traditional narrative beats in favor of twists that challenged audience assumptions. Johnson began writing The Last Jedi while The Force Awakens was still in production, and even asked Abrams to make a few changes to better fit his vision for the sequel. For instance, BB-8 was originally meant to join Rey on her journey to find Luke, but Johnson requested it be R2-D2 instead, since he had a stronger emotional connection to Luke. And in the original ending, Luke would have been shown levitating rocks while meditating, a powerful image of a Jedi Master at peace. But Johnson had other plans. He asked Abrams to remove it, as he wanted Luke to be cut off from the Force entirely. Luke's portrayal in the film would become one of the most controversial creative decisions in the entire franchise. Rather than the wise and hopeful Jedi fans had come to expect, Johnson reimagined Luke as a disillusioned hermit, bitter over past failures, and convinced the Jedi should end. In storytelling, characters follow what's called an arc. They start out thinking or feeling one way, go through challenges that push them, and by the end, they learn something new that forces them to grow or change in some meaningful way. When Rian Johnson sat down to write The Last Jedi, he didn't want Luke to simply be a wise old mentor in the background, a passive Obi-Wan figure who exists solely to train the next hero. He believed that Luke, as the legendary protagonist of the original trilogy, deserved a full arc of his own. Not only that, but Hamill made it clear he didn't want to come back for just a brief cameo or a passive role with little impact. However, rather than continuing Luke's heroic legacy, Johnson chose to deconstruct it, envisioning a man broken by his failures, disillusioned with the Jedi, and hesitant to rejoin the fight. And while in theory, Luke rediscovering his belief in the Jedi and returning to save the day might sound like a satisfying arc, the problem was how that arc began. The idea that Luke Skywalker, the very symbol of hope in the original trilogy, would abandon his friends and exile himself felt completely out of character to many fans. After reading the script, Mark Hamill would tell Johnson that he fundamentally disagreed with how he saw the character. The Luke he had played and that audiences had grown up with was someone who would never give up on others. In Empire Strikes Back, Luke leaves his training early in order to save his friends, even when warned it could doom him. In Return of the Jedi, he throws away his weapon rather than kill his father, believing there's still good in him and determined to bring him back to the light side, a far cry from the Luke in The Last Jedi who contemplates killing his nephew in his sleep. Hamill voiced serious concerns about the character's direction and suggested alternatives he felt were more true to Luke, but Johnson refused to adjust course. To him, subverting expectations was more important than honoring the legacy of the character, even if it meant alienating the man who made Luke a hero in the first place, as well as the franchise's fans. And while Hamill would say he had to put aside his feelings to try and realize Johnson's vision the best he could, he was so unhappy with how Luke was written that he brought it up in nearly every interview during the film's press tour, something he later came to regret. It wasn't until The Mandalorian that fans finally got the post-Return of the Jedi Luke Skywalker they had been waiting for, confident, heroic, and true to the legacy they remembered. Luke wasn't the only character undercut in The Last Jedi. Finn, who had been positioned as a co-lead in The Force Awakens, saw his momentum stall in the sequel. Early trailers for Episode 7 showed him wielding a lightsaber, leading many fans, especially black fans, to hope he might be the franchise's first lead black Jedi. While Mace Windu had come before, Finn was the first time a black character was set up as a central hero hero in a new trilogy. That hope faded when The Force Awakens revealed he wasn't Force sensitive, and The Last Jedi only deepened the disappointment. Rather than continuing his journey from runaway stormtrooper to Resistance hero, Finn was sent on a detour to Canto Bight with a newly introduced character, Rose, as many fans, as well as John Boyega himself, criticized it as feeling disconnected from the core story. It didn't help that this choice pulled Finn away from Rey and Poe, unraveling the dynamic that The Force Awakens had started to establish. Boyega later said he felt iffy about The Last Jedi, admitting he didn't agree with many of the creative decisions. He spoke with Mark Hamill at length about his frustrations, and revealed that the separation of the main trio, himself, Daisy Ridley, and Oscar Isaac, left them all feeling disappointed. It was hard for all of us, Boyega said, noting how the original trilogy had a strong trio dynamic that helped define the story. I do feel, even after 3 films, we still don't know them as much as we got to know Han, Luke, and Leia, said Boyega. For a character introduced with so much potential, Finn's arc felt increasingly aimless. The Last Jedi also abandoned several major setups from The Force Awakens, leaving fans with more questions than answers. The most glaring example is Snoke, who was positioned as a powerful, mysterious figure orchestrating events from the shadows. Rather than explore who he was or how he rose to power, Johnson dismissed him as a generic Palpatine knockoff and killed him off abruptly, with no explanation as to his origins. And while subverting expectations can be interesting, this left a gaping hole in the story. Where did such a powerful dark side user come from, and how did he rise to power? Johnson didn't seem to care. The same goes for the Knights of Ren, who were hyped up in the first film and heavily marketed, only to be nearly completely ignored in The Last Jedi, despite it being suggested that they were former students from Luke's Jedi Temple. Even the mystery of Luke's lightsaber, a key object characters were still fighting over, was brushed aside without explanation before being ripped in half. These weren't just minor threads, they were core elements that had driven fan speculation and investment, and their sudden dismissal left the sequel trilogy feeling disjointed and directionless. Beyond these issues, The Last Jedi also faced criticism for several plot decisions that many viewers found baffling or out of place. One of the most mocked moments was Leia flying through space after nearly dying in an explosion, a sudden and visually awkward display of force powers that felt unearned and jarring. The film's central conflict, a slow-speed space chase where the Resistance ships are just out of range of the First Order, was also criticized for feeling drawn out and lacking urgency. Vice Admiral Holdo's refusal to share her plan with Poe led to unnecessary conflict that felt contrived, especially when a simple conversation could have avoided the chaos. Meanwhile, Rose's kiss with Finn, after stopping him from sacrificing himself, came off as forced and tonally strange, particularly given the high-stakes moment they were in. These kinds of choices didn't just confuse audiences, they added to the growing sense that the film prioritized subversion over coherent storytelling. After Episode 9 director Colin Trevorrow was fired, fans were left wondering who would step in to close out the sequel trilogy. There was even speculation that Rian Johnson might return to finish what he started, despite the controversy surrounding The Last Jedi. When it was announced that J.J. Abrams would return instead, many hoped he would steer the franchise back on track. But as much flack as The Last Jedi received, it might have been wiser to lean into the changes Johnson had made in order to maintain some sense of narrative cohesion. Instead, Abrams was brought back not to build on what came before, but to course correct it, and the result was a film that felt more like damage control than a satisfying conclusion. Rey, previously told she was no one, was retconned into being a Palpatine, a reveal that directly contradicted the previous film's message about legacy and identity. Rather than letting Kylo Ren fulfill his arc as the primary villain, the story resurrected Palpatine with little explanation. Even Snoke was revealed to be a lab-grown puppet all along, created by Palpatine as part of a convoluted plan. Rather than building upon the foundation Johnson had laid, the Rise of Skywalker scrambled to undo it, a move that left the trilogy feeling thematically incoherent and creatively disjointed. At its core, The Last Jedi is a film about failure, how it humbles us, teaches us, and ultimately shapes who we become. Each major character is forced to confront their flaws and mistakes. Luke learns to stop running from the past, accepting his role as a symbol of hope as he sacrifices himself to reignite the spark of the Resistance. Poe learns that reckless heroism isn't true leadership, and that true leadership often means patience, sacrifice, and knowing when not to fight. Rey learns her identity isn't defined by lineage, a direct challenge to the myth of legacy in Star Wars, and Finn, through his failed mission to Canto Bight, learns that the Resistance is worth fighting for, not just for Rey, but for everyone. Even Kylo Ren, in rejecting his past, fails to find a future. It's clear Rian Johnson set out to challenge expectations and explain how growth is born from failure, but ironically, the film itself became a lesson in failure. While critics praised its boldness, many fans felt alienated by the way it handled beloved characters and unresolved storylines. In trying to tell a story about failure, Johnson created one that, for a large part of the fanbase, felt like exactly that. And then, in an effort to appease fans upset by the film, Episode 9 scrambled to reverse course, resulting in a finale that many saw as a disappointment, and a trilogy that felt like a creative failure. Thanks for watching, everybody, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more of Hollywood's untold stories and unmade movies.